All righty, folks. Hello and welcome to this month's webinar. How's it going, Kels? Good to see you here.
Oh, it's going good, Paul. Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I love this one. This is like it's like where the rubber hits the road.
It really is. And I got to say, I think this the mindset about this, the beliefs, the thought leadership, at least in the Pro CNC days, very much came from you. So,
Oh, I was one
um,
of many. I was one of many. There's lots of people who cared a lot about this, and we spent some time on it.
we sure did. And nothing's ever perfect, but we made a lot of progress. And I think there's a lot of culmination of maybe many people's thoughts that are coming into today. So I'm excited to share that with this group that has just joined us. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I see there are people streaming in. This seems to be a very popular topic. There was a lot of registrations. So let's start as we like to do with all our webinars. Eric, love it, man. Thank you. Where are you joining it from? You said it before I even said it. Eric's definitely been on these webinars before. Matt from Bozeman, Montana, Frederick, Colorado, Hudsonville, Michigan. Thank you, Steve. Appleton, Nathan, good to see you here. Brainerd, Everett, Big Timber, Montana, awesome. Cypress, California. There we go. Oklahoma, California. I'm just going to go with the states. North Carolina, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us from all over North America. There we go. Jim, good to see you here. JC, Texas, right on. Ohio. Fantastic. Some of you are chatting to, oh, hey, Nush. Some of you are chatting to just hosts and panelists. Please make sure you choose everyone in the chat, and then everyone can see what you're chatting. So hey, Martin, good to see you here. Awesome.
Oh,
We
nice.
have a good crew of both non-customers yet and customers. So it's great to have you all mingling here. So a few ground rules as always. Feel free to throw in the chat if you have an idea or a comment or a statement. If you have a question, we will definitely have time for questions at the end, but we will also try to get to them as we go because sometimes just the flow of things works better that way. So put them in the Q&A section because they're much easier for me to see when all the comments are streaming by. And I think that's it. We are going to have a poll at the end that has helped us build. She's going to share a few links along the way. So if you see some links, come into the chat, go ahead and click them, save them off as a tab on your browser, and you can browse them later. But let's dig into this, Kels.
All right.
And I'm going to start with our mission, which I like to start every webinar with. We deliver powerful manufacturing software by deeply understanding our clients' challenges in order to meaningfully improve their businesses and in turn their communities. Don't even have to read it anymore. I can look straight at the camera and say it. And hopefully we are, and actually I've just added this slide just here in a second, what our goal for today is, and this is what we're going to be talking about. Won't read all these things, but you can check it out. But we just added this slide 10 minutes ago. Abra no longer panics when I say to add a slide in the last 5 minutes before the webinar starts. But I really think it's worth talking about what is the goal of the webinars that we put on. And in this case, we really want we want you folks to come away with some actionable strategies and tools and concepts to reduce the chaos in your business and improve the profitability. And I think the clients on this call will probably share, and feel free to if you want to, that one of the biggest changes that ProShop has helped them, I said, on board as maybe a concept that's really important in their business is the appropriate level of planning for their jobs and being more proactive about that rather than just throwing a job over the wall to manufacturing and saying good luck with it. That's a recipe for a lot of chaos and lost profitability. So that is our goal for today, to help share those strategies. And let's get into it. So we're just going to talk about just a few things that can go wrong if you aren't doing this secret thing that we talked about in the marketing of this webinar. And I know all of you know these things far too well because you live with them every day. We certainly did at Pro CNC for many years. So Kels, what are some of these things that are that happen
Yeah.
on a daily basis, hourly even, for shops that don't have the right level of planning?
Oh, I mean, the list is, as most people know, as long as your arm and then some. But the oversight component of things is a huge breadth of things, and of course, you can't plan for every eventuality. But I think that really common stuff that happens all the time is the right kinds of tools aren't available, special gauges you need. Maybe there's even some problems with the material that yes, you have it. Like it's not that you don't have it, but it's not cut yet, or it's not, um, in exactly the right place that it's supposed to be. So you hunt around to try and find out where it is. And then there's all kinds of things like, you end up getting the wrong impression about a job because of missing lead times, or, there's things that, you don't notice until you kind of get into the job. But in retrospect, you think I could have seen that if I spent like a little bit of time and a checklist that ran me through a few of the things that we run into all the time. So
Yep.
yeah, the oversight component is huge. I personally love this next one as well, the lack of confidence and
Hmm.
repeatability. I think it's a really tough one to measure, but I bet that if you asked anybody, are you willing to work faster if you have confidence in the work and the foundation and all the effort that was put into the step before you?
Hmm.
The answer is absolutely yes. And you
Oh,
can't
for
double
sure.
check everything that somebody just did before you. That's crazy. Like you got to depend on them. But how do you know? How do you have confidence that they've done their
Sure.
part well? And I think the tools and the way you do that uh, does get way higher and move faster, all on its own.
Yep. I mean, a simple, oversimplified analogy is if you load G code into a machine that is totally proven, it's been run dozens of times before. You can just load it, hit cycle start. The tools are the same as they were before. You don't need to step through it, in single block mode and just like make sure I'm not going to crash this
Single
thing or
block.
I'm going to.
Yeah.
So anyway, just extending that out to the greater list of things that need to get properly done in order for a job to be executed well definitely slows people down or speeds them up, depending on which side of that you're on. And obviously, when some of the things happen that you described, uh, they can cause just a ton of that firefighting and scrambling and last minute, reacting to things.
Yeah, and I
It's
think just on
expensive.
top of the reacting part, yeah, totally. It's sometimes just the case that you full on have to stop. Like, we gotta park that job for the next 8 hours. Well, something happens, something gets programmed or a tool comes in or whatever. And that stoppage is not just loss of that machine tool making parts, it's task switching for everybody. And it's like, did we have the time in the schedule? And so yeah,
Mhm.
it hits you on a number of different fronts.
Yeah, because that delayed job might delay another one, which you then need to expedite to get to on time, so the customer isn't mad at you, and this knockdown effect that can be impacted so impactfully by better planning. And then we're going to talk also about what we call pre-processing. That's sort of a pro shop term, but fundamentally, it's the idea of thorough job kitting, making sure that the things that need to be ready for a job. We have this belief that when a setup person goes into a machine setup, they should be able to come out of that with a good part in hand without ever having to leave that machine. And if they did have to leave, that means something on the checklist wasn't actually done or done properly. So if they need to go find the thread gauge or go look for the material or go ask the programmer about something that they didn't have documented well enough, that's just that's more downtime. That's more not making chip time. Your schedule's slipping and you're just burning money. So anyway, we're going to talk more about that. So what is this big secret, which is not actually all that secret at all? It is really to plan jobs based on risk. The when I was actually first thinking about this, I was thinking, more thorough job planning. But Kelsey, you made the very appropriate comment that it's not actually more thorough because sometimes you need less planning if you have a very simple job with super low risk. It's the right appropriate level of planning based on the job at hand and how much risk there is that you might have something go wrong or something you aren't accustomed to or whatever that might be.
Sure, like if you're gonna, plan to make breakfast this morning and it's like a bowl of cereal and milk, like you don't need a lot of planning. But if you're putting on a barbecue for 30 of your closest friends, you better make sure you got enough propane and there's, all the right stuff, right? So
Sure.
yeah.
Yep. So we'll get more into that for sure. But one thing I can relate this to is this thing that we called the triple threat at Pro CNC was that if we had jobs that had materials we weren't comfortable with or challenging to us, cosmetic requirements of beautiful surface finishes or and high tolerances at the same time, like those were going to be incredibly challenging to us. And generally, it's because there are details about that we didn't plan for well enough, or we just didn't have enough expertise in. Um, and it's related. Like if you get a job in and it's the same, it's a variant, it's a dash number of something you've made hundreds of times, and you know all about it. You know exactly the tools, you know exactly the work holding, you know exactly the programming approach. You can almost go on autopilot and just it's going to go well. But if you're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary or something you haven't seen before, yeah, putting that appropriate level of planning to make sure you're covered all your bases is just so important to avoiding those mistakes, which will make that profit of the job just slip away. Um, so this often also is true in longer term production jobs, right? The bigger the scope of a project, like you said, big, big picnic with lots of people, you need a lot of logistics. So pre-planning, doing this more appropriate level of planning is going to give you a much better return and more likely to have that bigger project come with bigger profits as well. And I guess the appropriate right size is important because there's overhead associated with doing this. And you don't want to put a blanket approach on everything and possibly over plan jobs that really just don't need it, right? It's got to be that appropriate level based on what's in front
And
of
that's
you.
actually a good segue into how we handled what we called the war room planning, which you know, is basically this checklist of all the things that you should sort of consider as jobs go along. And in some companies, I've seen this really done exceptionally well. And in some companies, it's always the same process. You get the 6 or 7 people who have all the different facets all together in the same room, and you all, sit down and review the job, and everybody has an opportunity to talk about what, especially for new jobs. And one of the things that we really focused on as part of that planning process was to get the person who was the person in charge of the job, the person who was actually going to be the project manager, to make an
Mhm.
assessment about how much input they really needed. This is a
Right.
quick and dirty prototype. This sucker's really going to be gone by the end of the day. We do not
Right.
need 6 people, even for 15 minutes, because you just spent
Sure.
an hour and a half on the job, right? So this planning section and this appropriate amount is definitely something that we're entrusting that project manager, that person in charge of that particular work order, to scope correctly. And if they're off one way or the other, they can learn from it, but get that scope about right. And maybe
Yeah.
this is a good opportunity just to quick flash up that war room planning type of process.
Sure.
I don't know yeah, let me just take it over for a quick second, kind of
Yeah.
show
Go.
that.
Yeah. Go for it.
So this is something that I just wanted to shout out for those people who don't have ProShop or didn't get the quality assurance side of things with all the best practices. But this is a fairly detailed set of steps for planning, and it's got different responsibilities for different people. And there's planning up front before you even really get the job going, and then there's planning as you like get into programming and some of the really detail oriented stuff. But this list is one of those things where you could be like, oh, this job doesn't have any particular bill of materials items. Okay, skip that, we won't do that part. Long lead time stuff, yeah, we reviewed it, it's not there, we're done with that, right? So
Mhm.
this kind of right sizing as you go through the process, or say, geez, I don't actually know enough about the full inspection plan. Well, let's go take a look. We have this inspection plan, developing inspection plan. We take a look. It could be the short version. Do we have the right stuff? A little review. Or we could go in and dive deep and be like, yes, here is a very fulsome, have we developed an inspection plan, right? And this is the kind of level you need to make choices about how far you go, right? So
Yeah.
that's just an example of where you can right size that. And this level right here, absolutely. If you're doing space parts that need all of the right kinds of, buy-offs at every single stage of the manufacturing process, you absolutely want to do this. It's going to be worth it, right?
And your customer probably requires it.
That
Whereas
Two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there may be jobs where that's not necessary. And this is
Yeah.
actually maybe a great segue. Brian had a question here. For a small 2 to 3 person shop that might make not sense to go to full ERP yet, what can we do to take steps towards more thorough planning and scheduling prior to implementing ERP that will lead to a smooth transition and keeping a tight schedule as our job size and volume increases? And it sounds like it's becoming an issue at their even a 2 or 3 person shop, which we've heard so many times before.
Yeah.
But I will say we have probably a dozen, 2 dozen shops under 5 people, 2 to 3 people, we've made videos with them. We've done other things with them. So it's never too early. We have some 1 person companies, quite honestly. But I'd say really, taking away what we're talking about in this webinar, about looking at your new jobs, coming up with an appropriate plan for the level of risk or the level of sophistication that job is pushing you towards. Yeah, here's the pre-processing checklist. So pre-pro shop, this checklist was in Excel, right?
Yep.
You can totally use a spreadsheet. You can use a piece of paper if you want. But the idea of saying, yep, I'm going to verify that we did these things. Go read the checklist manifesto. It was one of the inspirations for this checklist process in the first place. That's a great book. But doing something as simple as that can be a great first step to making sure that you are doing that better planning. And quite honestly, Brian, that better planning will lead to better scheduling. Like
Oh
we've
yeah.
written before, that the secret to better scheduling and better on-time delivery is not actually better scheduling software, right? It helps, but there's so many things that feed into scheduling that if you don't get right, will implode your schedule. So it doesn't matter how good your software is. If it can't account for the fact that changed your work holding process and you needed an extra 1/4 inch of material, but you ordered material that was too thin, and then you realize at the last second that you can't hold it the way you thought you could hold it, and you're like, all right, well, I got to scrap that or come up with a different way or buy new material. No scheduling software is going to accommodate for that. But if you have those key people like Kelsey we're talking about, they come together and say, all right, what's the plan? Well, we're going to hold it in the 5th axis vise like this. Oh, that means we need some extra stock on that side. Okay, we better order that size material, right? Just one example of the kind of things that only takes a few minutes, but can save you hours or days on the back end.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
just even that to the point of your question about getting sort of taking steps towards being sort of ERP ready, it really is that mindset of having a more established, thorough process that you follow. It's a little bit less, shoot from the hip, but quite honestly, scalable businesses are not shoot from the hip businesses. They just can't be. So
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah, we
that
had a
was.
quick question from Robert about who should complete the pre-processing checklist. And I love the question, and I think it's important, and it's right on point for what we're talking about. Remember that the planning steps and the completion of that work is kind of two sides of the coin. Like, yes, we need to identify, um, get material, onto the purchasing dashboard so that it can be ordered. It's like, okay, but who should check off that that is in fact done? Is that the person who ordered the material, or no, this one was just making sure that we've got it set up. But remember, checklists are better if they take you where you want to go. So this was like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't just a checklist like Excel might be. This is looking at, is the material in WIP? Is it on order? Well, in this case, we had a little bit of it already in inventory. Plus, we ordered some more, and it's already here. It came in on this. It came in on this day, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's clear enough. And then I, or almost anybody who just reviewed that, can easily accept that. Say, yep, in fact, not only has it been queued, it's here, right? So who can complete these? Well, we have some who's responsible over in this section. You see it over here. Um, and that's a general rule. But also, a lot of times anybody can validate that the work has been done. You just look and say, is it actually true? Has this thing been completed? Like take a look at the cutting tools. See, are they actually, oh, no, those statuses are not good. We need to make sure we get that all in here. we'll just get that in here by by Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And then we could be like, yeah, whoops, I forgot to hit the go button. That will get all the stuff on this checklist set up, right? So now we've got a status for all of those. It's like, yep, we've completed that. I can just come back here and say those cutting tools are in fact on order.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, buddy. That was great. Let's
I'll
jump
let you
back.
take back over. Yeah.
Yeah, let's jump back into this. And thank you, Mark, for sharing that anecdote. Yeah, took 4 extra days because something got screwed up. That has probably created some chaos, I imagine, in the shop,
Yeah.
and possibly to the customer. Or you spent a lot of money to try to make it not have an impact on the customer. So let's just talk about setup times. When you do this more appropriate level of planning and you do that checklist, you will have faster setup times. It comes down to both the confidence that Kelsey talked about and this idea of showing up to a machine, doing all the work, and coming out with your good part without having to run across the shop a dozen times looking for things and scrambling. So everyone wants lower setup times because it just means you're cutting chips more often, and so it can help. What was that last bullet point? Identifying potential risk during estimating. Yeah, this is important.
Yes. Good one.
So when your estimating and sales team are looking at a job, that is the first opportunity to review and look out for the gotchas, right? The things that are not just a total slam dunk. And trying to capture that in a way that can easily be flowed downstream. Because I don't know how many times it's happened in your shop, probably often. I know it did in ours, where the sales and estimating people know something, but they didn't share it with planning, with scheduling, with purchasing, and it bit them in the butt later on. It's like, oh man, I forgot to tell you that this is a special anodize and there's only one company and they have a 6-week lead time. And they accidentally sent it to the local vendor and they can't do the special mil spec. So the whole thing just goes to heck. So anyway, so making sure you capture that and we can pull up and I can just, let me see if I can.
I got a process dev if you want to I can just pull that up for you.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
So this is actually a good example right here. We've got process dev shown. That's what we call this area of the software. And it's got a couple components, right? Like right now, we're looking at the estimate. Excuse me. We're looking at the estimate and we're looking at what was estimated and known to be potential issues. And then because we've been making this part, we also have stuff from the part that was an issue and that we spent some time resolving or reviewed or wasn't even successful, right? We tried just updating the tool speed and feed, and that wasn't successful. So we're getting a different kind of tool, and hopefully that's going to make the difference on these. So this identification flows straight from the estimating process to be available for the planning process, and then even through all the production processes, you get to actually put new information about the issues you're having and get them resolved. You can message the planner right away. And that's kind of like the next best thing to having pre-thought about it. But in the estimating, you did pre-think about it. You can use this information to inform the planning of the job when you win it.
Yep. Perfect. And that will actually pop up sometimes even proactively to certain people and certain times of the process. Let me come back to my share. Let's move that out of the way.
Just while you're doing that, I'll answer this one from Robbie. Can you schedule the setup not to start before the ETA for raw material? Well, I'll just say that in general, ProShop is not in the business of preventing you from doing stuff. We're trying to enable you to do stuff. So for example, in that, can you prevent me from scheduling it? Of course we could, but maybe you want to set up the job on a different material or some scrap that you have and start the setup the day before you get the material. So we show you right when the material is coming in on the schedule. And if you choose to schedule it before that, that's okay. You can do that. But you know it because as soon as you look at the schedule, you know when it's. So there you go.
Great answer. Awesome. So what we just shared was value stream decisions. So this, of course, varies considerably in different companies because different companies have different value streams. But I know at our shop, we had a prototype department. We had production department. We had a team dedicated to outsourcing and working with our vendors to bring those projects in. We had design engineering. We had assembly, and based quite honestly, probably the sort of fork in the road about where we're going to send a job, a regular machining job was really, is it a prototype? Is it production? Or do we not even have bandwidth and we need to outsource this? And of course, those folks have different needs, different resources, different skill abilities. Yeah, it was definitely a part of the decision of, how much do we need to share? How much thoroughness is there to this plan? Because quite honestly, like those prototype guys, they were so amazing. You'd give them a part number and a model, and within an hour, they'd be cutting chips already, right? They'd be roughing out the first stop while they're programming the second, tool after the roughing tool. So, and they would always figure out how to way to make it come together, incredibly quickly. Kels, any other ideas or thoughts about this? I know we're gonna maybe you can bring up that project assignment
Sure,
dashboard.
yeah, I'll show that real quick, just the project assignment. So what we've got for project assignment in terms of, having multiple value streams, is that, you can take work orders and not only assign them to individual project managers, but you can set types and have preferred routings and maybe set classes, move them to active or expected. And you can do all that in kind of a bulk way so that when you do a large number of them, you can efficiently process these kinds of work orders into the right value streams, which gets them into planning sooner, right? The sooner you can get them into planning, the better off you are in terms of accounting for long lead time issues. So you can, have a bunch of things changed all at once if you wanted to like set the same plan, or you could just go through and be like, oh yeah, I want this to be Brian, and this one I'm going to make that Adrian, and this one here. So you can do a bunch of different work orders all at once, right? And set up
Yep.
these. And once you've assigned a planner and a project manager, and the thing is active, then you're actually good to go. And those should be the type of work order that is actually got someone in charge of it. These people are the people you were literally asking to do this pre-planning work, this planning work, right?
Yep. And
So
they'll get notified. It'll be on their dashboards. And one of the things that I was just heard, at a customer, or I've heard it more than one time now, was this actually particular one came from Justin at Focused on Machining, was, previously in their old paper-based system, they would get a job, they would turn it into a traveler, and then they would, sit it in an outbox, and then it might go into the inbox of their programmer planner, who would finally look at it like the day before it needed to run, right? And that might have been a week or two elapsed time, right? To think more thoroughly, get the plan together, get those things coming. And that caused so much friction, so much scrambling. Whereas, now if they can assign those project managers and planners ahead of time, instantly, and maybe you can pull up an estimate and we can talk about how you can set defaults even in your templates.
yep.
He's like, people now are looking at those jobs within 30 minutes of them being assigned to them. And they are already, processing those things and thinking about the tools and thinking about the work holding. And just that little bit of time, it's not taking more time. They're just doing it far earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is allowing them to bring in that tool non-overnighted, right? I remember another client, Chris at East Branch, said they used to spend like $30,000 a year on overnight shipping charges and expedite fees for plating just because they were behind schedule and scrambling, and getting more proactive, doing these things days or weeks in advance, almost completely eliminated those costs for them, which all went to the bottom line. So it's coming back to the topic of the webinar, getting rid of those losses in profit. That's a direct, actionable result of doing this process better.
Awesome.
So yeah, so let's talk about just real quick.
Yeah.
Estimate flowing to a part, flowing to a work order with those default planners.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just take a look. When this job was originally estimated, this default was already set in here. Like, I bet I know who the right person is for this kind of work, right? And you don't have to have a person in here. You can have a group of people, meaning like a company position or a role or responsibility. You can definitely do that. But if you know specifically someone is in that role, then good. We can put them in here. But the minute that this is transitioned into a part number, right, those already stay as what is expected to be the right person or company position to do that work. But of course, this could change over time. So, your estimate is the starting point. But as you move forward in time and somebody becomes an expert in this, or maybe they move into a different role in the company or, aren't with the
Or out
company
on
anymore at all.
vacation or
Yeah,
yeah.
you can assign someone else to this, or you could just choose a particular work order that normally might go to Thomas here, but we're going to actually assign it to someone else, right? So we had that project assignment dashboard, but we're like, oh, Thomas is out right now. Let's go ahead and give this one to Jason because he's the right guy to take over for this. So now
Mhm.
Jason's in charge of this. He gets the message. You've just been assigned this job. Things are rolling along. I'm just going to move this one to active.
Say there's
Um,
that Anderson brother combo is a good combination, I will tell you what.
if you could get the two of them on any job you're working on, you would be very lucky. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Awesome.
so that's just working it from a single job angle, and then this project assignment is working it from, the big picture. How many jobs have I got in the mix? Obviously, if you're, a two-person shop, you may not have 50 jobs that you need assigned. But if you're a larger company and you've got a lot of work flowing through the door, or you're doing large assemblies and you're only making a few of each, you definitely want to make sure that the right people are getting the information as soon as possible about the things that are coming down the pike. And you don't want it to be, hey, Bob, we got another one of those assemblies. See if you can figure out what we need for it.
Sure. Yep.
All
Yep.
right, I'll
And
turn it back
it's
to you.
yeah, yeah. And it's not surprising that a lot of companies still operate that way because that's quite honestly a good and easy way to start when you're brand new and you're one person, two people, three people. But as Brian mentioned earlier in the comments, even two or three people now, that's starting to get become an issue, right? There's enough there's enough jobs, enough details, enough things to think about that all have to come together for those jobs to execute smoothly even in a three-person shop, right? Um, one of my sort of favorite customers is the Servin brothers with Servin Solutions, just the two of them, and they, knew that by the time they were in their second or third year of business, there was just so much in their heads they couldn't keep straight. They're like, we need a system for this, right? And they were just two people. So um, definitely wise to think about how to get past those initial first stages. All right, we've already talked about this a little bit. We have definitely been jumping around the slide deck, but maybe if there's some things we can talk a little bit more about that checklist. And for those customers on the actual call today, you will know what this is. New feature alert. This is coming in 5.2.3, which is coming out in about a month or two. Retain the pre-processing checklist last save state upon finalization or refinalization of work orders. So if there's anyone in the audience that loves that new feature, please throw it in the chat. This has been something that has been often requested, and we're finally putting that feature in place. So maybe, Kels, we can just bring that up, your pre-processing checklist up again, and maybe let's talk
Yeah.
about the config file for just a minute, because there you go, Danielle. Because this is such an important feature. And the
Yeah, yeah.
concept is just really important here.
Yeah, this is super important. I will jump to it. So, you've got a pre-processing checklist, and let's say, for example, that you decide you need to run this part a little differently or a lot differently, and you want to refinalize this work order to a different planning set of steps. This one's
And
maybe not the best
we
example
should,
because it's full.
yeah, we should maybe take a step back and just share a couple of other fundamental concepts first. Um, ProShop has the ability to have multiple routing options within the same part number. And this, I don't know if you can find one that does.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
I'll take a quick peek. Sorry. Yeah.
but that means you could build it in house on your vertical. You could, and it would take three or four work holdings. You could build it in house on your 5-axis and it only takes one. Or you can outsource it to a vendor if all your machines are busy. Um, and And that means if you what we call refinalize, change the operation steps. Yeah, here's a great one with several different options.
Yep.
Um, that we're going to rebuild that operations table on a work order you've already created. So let's say, yeah, we scheduled to do it in house, and then we realized we have to outsource this. So if you'd started your pre-processing checklist where you're checking material and tooling and gauges and stuff, and you're all of a sudden we don't need those things. We can refinalize the work order to an outsource method, and you can choose or not choose to wipe out that list, or retain the list exactly in the state that you had it in before. So it's an important step, important new feature. And then the other part we haven't talked about yet is the fact that that checklist is fully configurable automatically based on the type of work order that you're running. So we can
Yeah.
see this job here that job was a repeat production job.
Sorry. Yep.
That's okay. So
I was just going to show that exactly what you said there, the pre-processing checklist configurator.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely something um, that has a lot of depth to it, and it's both on type. Sorry, I'll make that just a little
and
bigger
you can
to have
minimize
this.
this side panel now on the left. So
Yeah, yeah. So, there's definitely showing this for all operation types or for selected operation types. So maybe you don't have this, for some types of operations. There's also some things that are more like work order level versus op specific. So you can do those and you can see some of them will be op specific and they will be shown one for each operation, and some of those are not. And then you can choose which kinds of work orders you want to apply this to. So prototype, first run, new rev, and repeat production. But maybe on this one, it's only for first run, new rev that you really want to, do this particular step, or, any of these kinds of options for choosing different types of work orders to show a whole different list. Lots of flexibility there.
yeah, yeah. And this comes back to this concept of right sizing your planning, right sizing your checklist. If you have that repeat production job that you've done many times before, you probably need a relatively small set of things, kind of like you see here, just to make sure that it's going to go smoothly. You got the tools, the materials, everything's ready to go. For a brand new job you've never done, we're going to see a much bigger checklist. You need to build your inspection plan. You need to do the actual CNC programming. You need to, verify your bill of materials. You need to, do all those additional things that you don't need to do on a repeat job. And so you don't want to always have a long checklist. So maybe, back to the question for Brian earlier, if you build your own checklist for things you got to make sure you do, make a couple variations of it. Make it for a brand new job or a repeat job at the very minimum. Those would be two sort of forks in the road that can give you a checklist like this one, or a much more consolidated list that you're not spending a ton of time checking things you don't need to check.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So Ryan asked a question.
Yeah.
This is not related to the topic, but on one of the work orders, it showed quantity 22, -2, +2. What does
Sure.
that
Well,
represent?
yeah, I mean, we can take a look at that. Like right here, this total is back up to 20, but what happened probably through this process is that, from the anodizer, we actually got back a couple of parts that were non-conforming, right? And so we actually backed it all the way up and decided we had to machine two more parts through this operation. So then we went ahead and did that, made those two extra parts, flowed them down, got them anodized, and then through incoming inspection, we did finally get 20 pieces as opposed to the two that were rejected. And that's what those negatives are about. Typically,
Right.
a non-conformance report would be associated with that.
Yep. Yep. Great question. Thank you for that, Ryan. Um, all right. Let us keep going here. We are actually ahead of schedule. This has
Mhm.
almost never happened. So we're going to launch our poll. Let me go ahead and do that right now. Oh, Abra's got it. Thank you, Abra. So yeah, just three simple questions. Kind of would love to kind of get the state of your planning processes at your shop, just so we can kind of aggregate that for knowing, how shops out there are doing it. And we can share that here in just a minute as you all finish. But definitely open up more Q&A. So if you have a question, throw it in the Q&A. You can even raise your hand. If you want to come on and actually ask it verbally, we can allow you to talk. We have that power. And we can have a conversation about something that you might have a question about.
Yeah, and I'll just put in just as we're getting those first ones in, we talk about planning level, and this
Oh
is
yeah,
a work orders planning level in terms of like how well planned is this job so far, right? So if this is the first time you've ever done it and it's going to the prototype department, it's like, hey, this is a low level of planning. Only someone who's super in the know, a specialized person or the planner themselves should do this work, as opposed to something that you've probably planned the heck out of and there's good documentation. There's photos about it. There's a 100% clear tool list with all the extensions and all the holders. And it's like, hey, follow the plan and you should be good. This will turn out great, right? So just even identifying that helps people.
yeah. I will share this story, which I love, and some of you may have heard it, so I apologize if you have. I was at a shop a few years ago now down in Portland, and I was there on the night shift, had just started, so minimally staffed, just two or three guys in the shop, and pretty much no one in the office. And there was a very young guy setting up a five-axis mill, and he couldn't have been more than 22 years old or something. And I said, maybe less, maybe 20. And I said, hey, how long have you been here? And he said, about 6 months. And I said, oh, and I did the quick math in my head, 6 months setting up five-axis on night shift. I said, what shop did you come from? Because you clearly have been a machinist for a while. And he said, I came from KFC. And I said, I don't know KFC. I know most of the shops in the Portland area, but I don't know that one. And he said, no, I mean Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I'm like, is this your first job machining? He says, yes. I said, how in the world are you on night shift setting up this really complicated job on this complicated machine? And they basically had the planning level high. So he said, well, let me show you. And he showed me the Pro Shop screen, and it was filled with pictures and videos and markups and things that the day shift and the programmer had created to let someone like him with good mechanical aptitude, a desire to learn, but not a lot of experience, successfully set up a five-axis mill on night shift, right? And I was like, wow, that is like where the rubber really does hit the road. Like, actionably improved performance out of this business with some simple tools. But you don't need, quite honestly, ProShop to do that. You could have a Google Doc with a bunch of pictures and some notes and a video clip that you took on your cell phone. It's not rocket science, but it does require careful planning and tools and just executing. So anyway, hopefully that can inspire you that you can, not have to hire the most senior level journeyman person to do complex work if you can put in the effort to document things well. All right, we have 100% of people
Oh,
answer.
nice.
Wow,
Wow.
that is amazing.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure I've actually
Thank you,
seen that
everybody.
before. Yeah, you guys rock.
Let me share these results. So this is really interesting. Only 3% have outstanding planning, 7% very satisfactory. Most of you have satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or poor planning practices. That is interesting.
Yeah, but I won't. I will say he said interesting, and sometimes that's a euphemism for bad. But this is not that uncommon. You think
Oh
about what
yeah,
we're trying to do
absolutely.
here as manufacturing companies in complex spaces. It's not surprising that you're just running to the next thing, and you've got tons to do. And that job that's coming up in 2 weeks is not front of mind, right? That's not the thing. You're like, hey, it's like this is due tomorrow. What? I can't work on the thing from 2 weeks from now. But as you get good at this, you will find it makes tomorrow's late job a thing of the past.
Yeah. And then how often are you reacting to things that could have been avoided with better planning? Almost half of you are saying it's happening often, and 40% of you saying sometimes. And only no one says never. That was probably realistic. Thank you for being honest. And just a couple of you say it rarely happens. And hopefully those are the Pro Shop clients answering those questions. And then how often do you overplan a job? This is interesting. Almost none. So the error is to rarely over plan jobs. But some of you say often, maybe 12%, 25% or more. You're doing more work than probably is necessary. Um, that is super interesting. Brian, yes, will be at IMTS. Abra can drop the booth number in the chat. It's 133027. But I'd love to see you, love to meet you there, love to have you come say hi. But you have to create a great platform to knit it all together. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. How do you change the culture if the overall mindset is firefighting?
Oh, it's like my
Oh,
favorite question, man. This is so
oh,
good.
you go for it, buddy.
All right, I'll give this one a go. Well, so there's two things that happen, right? Firefighting is rarely actually fun. I mean, there are a few who are uh, wired that way, but in general, firefighting is not that much fun. And so the first thing to do, in my opinion, is to give people a taste of what it's like to not firefight, to have things go smooth, to understand what the value is of having it easy to do. Sometimes there's good stories in there, and you can talk about the things that, both hurt you on the firefighting and helped you on the other side. But then the other thing that I think makes a huge difference in changing that mindset is to start to focus people into a common set of data and understanding. Where are we all looking at? Because a lot of firefighting comes from data that's not the same between different people or stored in a silo where things can't be really understood by the rest of the group. And it's like one of those cliches. If it was right out in front of everybody, you'd all have a much easier time solving the problem and doing it earlier. If it's obvious, right? Like, hey, this job needed to be planned. I didn't show it, or maybe I'll show it again right now. But in fact, I will just go ahead and show it. You know, right here, like you look at this situation and you realize, okay, this one's already been manufacturing planned. But we had another job that we were looking at, or this one we could back it up and say, we're not at that place yet. But we have common visibility to say, hey, it has to get through planning by the 19th in order to deliver, 4 weeks later to the customer. If everybody knew that this is the drop dead date, it can't be later than this date through planning. Otherwise, we are definitely going to be late. That's a huge way of shifting the culture. People see it, people understand it. And then, of course, people believe it, right? Like once it starts to happen and you know that this is the reality of the situation, then you actually can get people to buy into that culture of change. And there's all the little things like, hey, you know what? It doesn't take 2 days to get there. This one here, it's two extra pieces. It's those ones we scrapped. We're going to drive them over. Okay, go ahead and tell everybody that you're going to drive them over same day. Now people believe you. Oh, that's right. It doesn't need to be done till the 23rd. Okay, I'll get to that later this week instead of today, right? Showing that truth to everybody changes the culture.
Yeah. And occasionally I'll say there are folks that really thrive on chaos and they feel great about doing these acts of heroism. Um, but but that's again not really sustainable. And sometimes just having a conversation with, yeah, I know it's fun to feel like that. Maybe you can save that for your weekend hobbies, but at work we gotta be more disciplined, more practiced because it's super stressful for everyone else to be constantly running around doing stuff. So,
and you know what? There are plenty of ways to get people to be constant heroes. Continuous improvement is one of my favorite. Like, take all that energy that you were going to fight fires with and come up with something new and interesting and exciting to help the job that's coming up in a week instead of, wishing you had done something about it sooner. Take that energy. People can still be contributors, can still be exciting, can still solve problems. All of that is still on the table. This is not a
yeah,
robotic machine. It's redirecting your energy instead of scrambling to find it,
yeah,
put it in where you want it.
yeah, very good. So there's a question in here thank you, Danielle. Is there a report to see completed dates by op versus work order due date? So operations that are already complete versus just when the date. Maybe Danielle, can you elaborate that? So you're talking about jobs that are still active, or maybe you're talking about jobs that already completed and finished. Um, Oh, the due date by op. Completed due date.
Yeah, this is the due date by operation right here, right?
Yep.
It's shown on the work order.
So maybe
There's
she's
some other
asking
views.
what comparison that may be looking backwards once you finish a job. This was the date it was due. This is the date we actually did complete it. Doing a
Mm,
post-mortem a bit, if you will.
sure, yeah. There is this kind of oops, let me just turn off the simple view. There is this view of, operation must leave bys that is sort of separate from the work order side of things. That shows this broken down like this. But I'd have to think just a little bit about what you would want for a delta there. Like this one was 4 days ahead, this one was 2 days behind. We don't currently have that view of the completed date versus the had to be completed by date. I will say that these are color coded. So if these things were going to be late in the future, like even if it's not 10/8, but this isn't going to work, then this does show you that it's going to be behind that date. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if there's you'd know better if there's a custom query you could run to show when the date time date stamp of all those. Because as you mouse over a couple of those complete ones to show people, it does show you the time and date when it actually was checked off. Um,
yeah, and I think you could probably output a query that had those results, but not the delta. Like if you wanted to
right.
know,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
this one was 3 days ahead or 4 days behind, I think that's still at this point something you might have to run the delta portion in Excel or something like that.
Right.
I would say though that although that postmortem stuff is good, this session in particular is all about pre-planning and trying to get out in front of that instead of finding out real late in the process that you
Got it.
missed the date.
Yeah, she clarified. I would like to see the programming due date in one report, maybe for a bunch of different jobs, the date that the programming is due.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll give you a couple things right off the bat. In fact, I think I had it up here. And one of my, well, I'll just go to it here. Um, one thing that I think is valuable, especially if you have multiple people doing programming, if you're down at the user's side of things, like who's responsible for these things, from the user's perspective in terms of programming or planning, these jobs, I'm not sure what all we've got here. This is a little bit messy, but right here, you see this green bar. That is when the programming has to be done because the first manufacturing operation is going on onto the machine on that date. So you know right away by looking at people's schedules, a whole list of work orders when the programming has to be done for that particular job, right? That operation 15 or that operation 10 planning or program. That gives you the clear indication about when it has to be completed by, because that's when it's scheduled to go onto the resource. There is also a real opportunity we could probably look at in terms of, actually, I guess it would be here, just in terms of what the date is that this is needing to be completed by, only by this type of operation, manufacturing planning or part programming. We could run a query to probably show all of those. I'd have to think just a little bit
And
about what that
people's
query would
planner
look like.
dashboards, I think, do have or can easily be added, the scheduled start date, kind of like you were showing on the schedule, but
Hmm.
just in the actual job list of what they're responsible for.
Yep.
There's that
Yep.
scheduled start date column.
Yep. Right here. Yep.
And
Yeah,
that's the
for
first
sure.
manufacturing operation start date, just to be clear.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Well, the first scheduled operations start date, right? So if you're scheduled on an
Oh,
operation
if
that
it's
might not be a
scheduled.
manufacturer, might not be
Got
a
it.
machine, but it's a schedulable resource.
That's got it. Understood.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good proxy for what she was asking about. Hopefully you agree, Danielle. And then Marty asked this question. Thank you, Marty. How do you determine what is low risk versus high risk in job preparation? Is there a black and white way to separate these?
Yeah, I love this one too. I'm the big fan. I'm personally a big fan of like a 5 by 5, which is sort of 1 through 5 on severity. How bad would this be if this actually happened? Right? This problem, this issue, this risk. Um, where 5 is like really, really terrible, we'd have industry reputational damage. This would be a terrible outcome. And 1 is like meh, you know, wouldn't cost much. And then the other is likelihood. So that's the other axis of that 5 by 5. So you end up with a 25 grid And that likelihood, how likely is it to happen? Um, Combined with how bad would it be if it did happen, gives you that like nice risk score. It's pretty simple. There are plenty of complicated risk matrices that you could develop, but that one there is one of my favorite. And that gives you kind of an aggregate risk score. So 3 and 3, bingo, you get 9, right? That's kind of your current aggregated risk for that particular thing that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and we do not, unfortunately, have a risk score like that in ProShop today. So um,
On our
on
on
the
our
list,
roadmap, but
on the
yeah,
roadmap, yeah, it's on the
yeah.
list. But yeah,
And
building that in.
particularly with this process development, that's where we would be focusing it, right? Would be on all of the items that you might want to deal with and being able to give yourself a risk score. And especially as you mitigate them with solutions and they get resolved, then the risk can be dramatically reduced.
So I just thought of something. Maybe click on the risk tab if you don't. I don't know if this one
Hmm.
has any there, but one thing you could easily do, and risk was quite honestly something we just added to the list in this demo system. It might even be in our templates these days. But you could have two options there. You could have low risk and high risk, or
Hmm.
low, medium, high, and then you'd have three tabs across the top.
Hmm.
So you could do something as simple as that and just put the low risk items as low risk, the medium as medium, and the high as high. Obviously, that wouldn't factor in severity, but you could even just put that in your notes there. Um, and that at least gives you, some buckets to throw the level of risk. And that's purely subjective, right? That's you, the educated person, looking at a drawing, looking at a model, saying, how confident are we that we have this thing totally handled, right?
Yeah,
So hopefully
those
that is
fluctuations.
helpful. Great question. Really great question. And yeah, so there's a
And you could do an aggregated search on that. So if you had this across 20 part numbers, you could just say, hey, show me all the ones that have a process type of risk that are not yet resolved. And we could sort of analyze the current risk across multiple parts numbers.
awesome. I didn't even know you could do that. That's good. Um, Other questions? We have 3 minutes left. If not, I'm going to throw up our thank you and contact information. Uh, Not that you all probably need that. You probably have it already. But just to, where is my control panel? Oh, it's right in front
I
of me.
can stop sharing there.
Yeah. Um, so this has been a lot of fun. Kelsey, I always love doing these webinars with you. You have so many great insights to share. Thank you to the audience for all the great questions and the engagement. Hope to see you at IMTS. For those of you that are not customers, oh, there you go, Eric. If you plan to fail, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Um, oh, Steve asked, what is IMTS? IMTS is the biggest trade show in the machining industry. It's every 2 years. It's in McCormick Place in Chicago, and it starts on September 9th, my 24th wedding anniversary. Sorry to my wife that I will not be there. And it goes for 6 days. It's Monday through the next Saturday. And there's about 100,000 people that attend. Pretty much everyone in the machining industry that is selling products is there with a booth. There's thousands of booths. Um, we're bringing a team of, I think, almost 20 people, and it's going to be a heck of a good time. We're having our client happy hour on Thursday. But one of the cool things that we're doing for the second time in a row is we have our client ambassador program. So we have, I think, 28 clients that have signed up to come to our booth for 1 or more hours, put on a ProShop shirt, and just actually be there helping to sell ProShop, talk to prospects, talk to people about their experience with ProShop, and just paying it forward. It is incredibly humbling that they do this. It's incredibly fun. And it's just amazing to have someone come to the booth and say, yeah, I'm a shop of 30 people in Nebraska, and I need to talk. I want to learn more about ProShop. And I say, oh, sure, I'd be happy to talk to you. But Brian over here owns a shop as well. He's in Kansas, but he's happy to tell you about his experience, even show you ProShop here on this demo station, and just watch them talk and get in it to each other. And it's just incredible. So thanks. If there's any of you on the call that are in that client ambassador list, thank you for doing that.
Yes,
If
thank you.
anyone that wants to come, we'd love to see you at the booth. So thank you all again for coming. We'll
Thanks, everybody.
sign off now, and thanks again, Kels.
All
Appreciate
right.
it. All right. Cheers,
Talk to
everybody.
y'all soon.
See you on the next one.